Welcome to part 2 of this series. We will be finishing up this animation and shading the scene today. In the last tutorial we modeled all the objects, so if you want to follow along, go back and look at that. Let's get into it. Okay, so here we are with our paint bucket, and the first thing we're going to do is parent some objects together. So first let's select the handle and the handle connection point, and as well as the paint drip, and parent them all to the paint bucket. So select the paint bucket last and hit Control P. Okay, now we're going to select the paint bucket and then select the string and hit Control P again, and then set parent to object. Now when we rotate just the string, it will rotate everything from its rotation point. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is rotate the paint bucket a little bit. So RZ, and just rotate it like that. And then we're going to rotate these back like so. Okay, now I'm just going to delete the camera and the light. And we're going to add in a new camera. And we're going to bring it back. So GY. And then let's just fine tune it. I want a pretty zoomed out view. And then we can just move it up. I'm liking this look. And I'm also seeing that we might not have enough geometry on this paint drip. So I'm just going to add another loop cut there or something, and then maybe just scale it out a little bit. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is parent this camera to the paint bucket. Control P and object, and now when we rotate the string, it rotates everything, which is not what we want. We want the camera to not rotate. We do want it to move along with the paint bucket. So to fix this, we're going to select the camera. We're going to add a driver. So hit N and then go to rotation, and we want to add a driver. So click add, right click and then add driver. And then for this variable here, we're going to select the object as nerves path 001, which is our string, and then the type is going to be Y rotation. So pretty much what this variable is it's just the Y rotation of that string. And then what we want to do is counteract that Y rotation for the camera. So we're just going to set this to negative there, or var. So now when we rotate this string, you can see that it does what we want it to. And then another thing to note is that this turns purple to show that you have a driver there. And that when you rotate this, you can see what it looks like. And then when you click on it, you can quickly edit the expression. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is add some animation. So open up our timeline a little more, and on frame 1, we're going to hit R45, and then I, and then insert keyframe rotation. Then go to frame 60, and then R -90, and then I rotation. Okay, so now we have a little animation that we can play. Okay, we're going to go to frame 60, and we're going to duplicate everything. So box select everything, and then Shift D. We're just going to line it up. You can just select this string and just line it up so that it, or vertically it's level with its x-axis, and horizontally it's level with the paint drip. Okay, now we're going to select this, and for the keyframes, if you notice, it's going in the same direction. We want it to go back this way instead. So in timeline, we're just going to hit S and then -1, and I'll just flip those around. And then we're going to bring it so that this first keyframe is on frame 30. So this is what it looks like now. Okay, so now on frame 60, we're going to want a few things. First, we're going to want to change cameras. So right now, you can see that this camera just stays the whole way, but we want to change cameras at frame 60. Also, while we're at that, I'm just going to hit turn the N to 89. So to do that, on frame 1, so shift left arrow, I'm going to select this first camera. We're going to hit M to add a marker, and then we're going to hit Control B to bind that camera to that marker on frame 1. So that means on frame 1, this camera is going to be what is displaying. Go to frame 60, select this other camera, add another marker, and then hit Control B. That means on frame 60, this camera is going to be what's shown. So on frame 1, you can see if we play it, it's on that camera, and then it switches to this camera. But of course, we have a big jump here. So to fix that, I'm going to go to frame 50. Let's tab out of edit mode, and what I'm going to do is animate this camera down to this other camera. Before we do that, I'm going to select this lower string. We're just going to bring it out so that the string is level with the front of this upper bucket. And you'll see why soon. But anyways, so on frame 50, we're going to hit I and then add a location keyframe. Then go to frame 60. Then we're going to shift select the lower camera. And then we're going to hit shift S and selection to active. And then hit I location. Now select the other camera. You can see it's the other camera because it only has one keyframe. And I'm just going to delete that keyframe. Okay, now I'll show you what it looks like. So we have our swinging, and then it goes down, and then we have more swinging. And if we turn off our overlays, you can see that it's a perfect loop. Great. So the next thing we are going to do is animate a little paint drop. So to do that, we're going to add in a circle. So mesh circle, and tab into edit mode, vertex select, go into top view, and we're just going to bring this up using O for proportional editing, make it kind of a raindrop shape, and then hit A, F to fill it, and then RX 90. Tab out of edit mode, we can turn off proportional editing with O, and let's just line this up and make it the right size. So I just want it to be at the bottom of this paint drip here, and we're just going to make it something like that size. Okay, now we're going to hit Control A, apply scale, and then we're going to bring it forward, so GY, and then we're going to add a modifier, solidify modifier, and we're going to set this offset to 0 so that it thickens itself from the middle outwards, and we can just kind of give it some thickness, and then shade smooth, turn on auto smooth. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is move the origin so that it's at the top, and that I'll show you why in a second. So if we go to tool and then effect only and choose origins, then you can just move that origin when you hit G and Z. Uncheck that, go back to item, close that if you need to, and then we can just scale from there, and you can see that that's why, because we want it to kind of grow as a raindrop. Okay, so go to 45. You can see we're going to have to move it around a little bit, but just line it up again, and then hit I and add a location scale keyframe. It'll say lock scale. Now go to frame 50 and then add another one, move it again, I lock scale, and then go to frame 60 and then move it down so it's inside this paint bucket, and then I lock scale. So now you can see why we had to move this paint bucket forward, because we want this drop to go into the middle of the second one, not in front of it. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is go back to frame 45, and we're going to scale this down to 0. So just hit S0, and then hit I again, and we'll just do lock scale. Okay, so now this happens. Okay, you can see that it's visible after this paint bucket moves away. So we're just going to make it so it's not visible after a certain point in the render. So here, when it's still hidden behind the paint can, we're going to go up here and turn on the render view restriction toggle. And then we're going to add a keyframe, make sure that this camera doesn't have an X on it, add a keyframe using I while you're hovering over it, then go to the next frame when it's visible, and we're just going to turn it off in render view. And then we're going to hit I to add a keyframe. So that means that after this frame on, it's not going to be visible in the render, even though it's still visible in the viewport. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is just some shading. So let's go to the shading workspace. And first we're just going to add a metal material for this paint bucket. So you can just name this bucket. And we're going to add a metallic, and we're just not going to change any other settings. That's how it's going to look. Okay, now we're just going to select this paint can and its handle, and as well as this handle, and then we're finally going to select the one that already has the material, and then hit Control L and materials, link materials. So now all those have the metal material. For these little connectors, we're going to use that same bucket material, but then we're going to duplicate it. So click this button, and then we're going to name this, we can just leave it as bucket 01, and I'm just going to turn down the roughness so it's more shiny. And let's do that same thing, just select that one and set it to bucket 01. Okay, next we're going to add in a plane. We're going to rotate it on the x-axis and then scale it up by 30. This is just going to be a simple background plane. Just move it back so it's not in the way. And then we're going to go over to coolers.co. I have this color palette picked out. I'll have a link in the description, but let's get started. So for the paint, I'm going to use this red color. So select one of these paint drops, and we're going to add a new material, call it paint. And then let's change the base color, go over to hex, and paste that hex value in there. Okay, for the background, I'm thinking that this is going to look good, so let's copy this lighter blue and select the background, add a new material, background. Okay, and paste in that blue hex value. For the string, I was thinking darker blue, so copy that darkest blue, and I'm just going to make a new material, call it string, and paste in that hex value again. Okay, so this is what we have. We're going to have to add this paint material to a few more. So select that paint drop, you can see it right there. And then we're going to finally select this first one, Control L, materials. Okay, so now if we go into camera view and reorient ourselves, you can see this is what we get. Let's go to frame 0, and you can see that we've forgotten to change the string on this first one. So just set that to string. And you can see that we have a little bit of a shift in the HDRI here, but it shouldn't be too noticeable. And speaking of an HDRI, we are going to use one for our final render. So you can see we don't have one set up right now. Let's change this to world nodes, and we're going to plug an environment texture into our background node. I'm going to be using this one from HDRI Haven. I'll have a link in the description, but I already have it downloaded, so you can get that all set up yourself. So I'm just going to open that up here. And oh, by the way, I just have it in 2K, but you can use whatever size you want. Okay, so if we go between frame 1 and 89, you can see we don't have very many differences in the lighting, so that's exactly what I was going for when I decided to use an HDRI. So now we're done with this tutorial. You can see if we play it through, it's going to be a little bit slow, at least on my computer when it shifts cameras and stuff, but we have this endless loop. So the next thing to do is, of course, render it out as a video. So under render output settings, I'm going to just select the file path in here, and I'll just call it output, and then we're going to change file format to FFmpeg video, and then under encoding we have this little list option here. I'm going to choose H.264 and MP4. Select that and then render it out.